Alright guys, I am back with another tutorial. In this video, I am going to deploy AWS's RDS Aurora cluster in a multi-AZ environment, and then we're going to test failover, and we'll see that the writer instance is going to fail over to the its secondary instance, which is the reader instance, and then the reader should become the writer, and then we'll test and make sure that our database information is still intact. So let's look at the network diagram here to see how it's going to work out. All right, so basically here's the network diagram. This environment is going to take place in US East 1, and the cluster is going to be deployed in VPC-A. I'm going to spin up a EC2 instance and then install MySQL onto that instance, and then we'll test connectivity from MySQL to the RDS Aurora cluster. So if you take a look here, this is the step that we're going to do. Basically, we're going to create a security group for the EC2 instance, and then we'll also create a security group for the RDS cluster, and then I'll launch an EC2 instance, and then I'll go ahead and download the MySQL into the EC2, and then we will launch the Aurora cluster in a multi-AZ environment, and then we'll go ahead and from the EC2 instance, we'll access the Aurora cluster via the endpoint of the writer instance, and we'll make some data manipulation onto the MySQL server, and then we will fail over the primary instance to the secondary Aurora instance, and then we should be able to see that the data in the database is still available and is still good. And once everything is verified, we can go ahead and tear down our environment. So let's go ahead and look at the AWS console and let's get started. So here's the AWS console. Let me go ahead and go into the VPC. So basically I have my VPC already set up. Internet connection is a little slow out here at the lake. All right, so I got my two VPCs. For this demo, I'm going to use VPC-A, and I already have my subnets defined as well. They're basically public subnets. I have my route tables in place, so that way the two subnets in the public subnet can have access to the internet. In terms of EC2 itself, I don't have an instance deployed yet, so we'll go ahead and do that pretty soon. And in terms of key pairs, I'll go ahead and just delete all this, and we can start creating a new pair from scratch. All right, so let's go ahead and create our first things first. We have to create our security group. So we'll go ahead and do that down here. So again, looking at the network diagram, we want to create a security group that will allow SSH into the EC2 instance, and then we'll also create another security group for our RDS cluster environment, which should allow port 3306. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so let's go ahead and create security group. We'll call this EC2-SG. SSH to EC2 is the description, and we'll choose VPC-A. We'll add an inbound rule of, say, SSH from anywhere. All right, and we'll go ahead and hit create security group. Okay, so that's done. We'll go ahead and create another security group for the RDS cluster. We'll call this RDS-SG. Access to RDS RDS, and we'll choose VPCA. And we'll say create security group. So now that's done. We'll go ahead, and now we're going to launch an EC2 instance, and then have that be placed in the AZ1, and then we'll go ahead and install MySQL onto that EC2 instance. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll just put in here EC2. We're going to go ahead and launch an instance. We'll call this MySQL-EC2. And we'll leave here everything by default for the AMI, and we'll choose the T2 micro. We're going to create a new key pair. We'll call it EC2 RDS-key pair .pem. We'll create key pair. All right, so that's downloaded into my downloads directory. And in terms of the network setting for the EC2 instance, we're going to choose VPCA to have that deployed in our VPCA, and public subnet 1 is already chosen for us by default there. Enable public IP address so we can SSH into it, and then we'll select an existing security group that we created earlier, which is the EC2-SG, and we'll leave everything else by default, and then hit launch instance. All right, looks like the instance is good to go there. So now let's go ahead and see if we can SSH into it. So I'll go ahead and use my studio code to access the EC2 instance, but first I want to change my key pair. So we'll go cmod 400 EC2-key pair. All right, we changed the permissions, so now we can go SSH -i EC2, and then we'll say EC2-user at that public IP address. Yes. All right, we are in. All right, so now let's see what directory we're at. Okay, that's the directory. So now here is my other, basically this one here is my other tab for my terminal. So let's see. So what we need to do now is download the MySQL, right? So we've got to go here, and let's go into Google, and we'll say download MySQL community, MySQL community downloads. We'll choose MySQL Yum repository, and then from there we can choose this one here, the very first one, the release EL 9.1. We'll hit download, and then we'll just say no thanks, just go ahead and start my download. And there it is, it's downloaded for us already in my download directory. If I go back to my terminal, ls star MySQL, it doesn't see that, ls, let's see what is there now. There it is, that's what I needed. Okay, great. So let me just get that going there. Apple C. So now we need to upload this into our EC2. So we'll go SCP -i, and then we need that EC key pair, EC2 RDS key pair, and then we need to put the path here of my current directory, which is, that's the directory right there. Oh, so I'll do this, and then I'll use my current directory, and then the file name that I want to upload. then from here we'll say EC2-user at the IP address of the EC2 instance, which happens to be this guy here. Go back to our terminal, and then we'll say colon, and then we'll say the directory, which is where we want to put that, and that directory is here on the EC2 server. All right, let's see if that works. All right, looks like it's uploaded for us. So let's take a look here. ls, oh, there it is there. Okay, good. So now we can say sudo yum update -y, sudo yum update -y. Okay, sudo yum install the MySQL RPM file. Forgot to hit -y earlier. Okay, that's done. Sudo yum install MySQL -y. Okay, great. So MySQL is installed. Let's go ahead and go back into the console. So now we need to create our RDS cluster. So we'll say RDS, and there it is. It's thinking. All right. And let's go ahead and say databases, create database. And we want to create a standard database. So, but we'll choose Aurora MySQL compatible. And then for the version, we'll leave that as default. We'll do this in the dev test environment. And then for the cluster identifier, we'll say RDS cluster ID -1. Okay, admin will be our master login. We're gonna choose self-manage for this. Master password is going to be password, just simply password, all lowercase, for the purpose of this demo. All right, and then here we'll leave that standard. Instance configuration, we need this to be burstable, and we'll leave it as database T3 medium by default there. We want to deploy this in a MultiAZ environment, so create an Aurora replica or reader node in a different AZ. So we want to choose that. And then we can say don't connect to EC2 compute resources. We can do that later. And then for VPC, we want to deploy this in our VPC-A. And then for our database group subnet, by default, okay, that's perfect. We'll leave it there because that's our only option. Public access, yes, choose yes. VPC security group, choose existing, and then we already created one earlier, so we'll choose the RDS and uncheck the default. All right, and then leave everything else by default. We don't need to use this now, but we can add it on later and hit create database. So this is going to take a while here to create. So it says creating. Close this out. Let's hit refresh. It's creating. I'm going to pause this video and I'll be back when it's done creating. All right, I am back here, and it took 1 minute to successfully create the cluster 1 ID. The other two physical instances are still being created. So I'll pause again and I'll come back when that's done. All right, guys, I am back, and it looks like the the writer instance is now available. That took about 6 minutes of waiting around for that to show up available. So then the last thing it's got to do is create the reader instance. So I'll be back when that's done as well. All right, guys, I am back, and the reader instance is finally now available. So that took about 7 minutes to create. So we had 1 minute for the cluster ID to create, and then the 6 minutes for the reader instance, writer instance, and then another 6 to 7 minutes for the reader instance. So that took a really long time, and it's probably because I'm out here at the lake and the internet is not very fast out here. So let's take a look here at what we got. So basically the cluster ID is just a logical name for it. The writer instance, if you notice, is currently in US East 1A availability zone, while the reader instance is deployed in US East 1B. So if we can take a look at the network diagram here, so here's our writer instance in its own AZ, and then the reader instance is in its own AZ, and then the cluster itself is out here logically. So let's take a look at the console again. So now what we need to do is get access to the Aurora. But let's click on this and see if we can look at some more information here. So if I click on this, you can see that the endpoint name is now displayed for the writer instance, and then the endpoint is also available for the reader instance. So with this, we should now be able to access the MySQL. And how do we do that? So we got to copy the writer endpoint name. I'll copy that. Go back to the terminal, and here we are in our EC2. And so if we say MySQL -h, the endpoint name of the writer instance, and then we'll say -u for username, then -p for the password to log in, and it's PASSWORD lowercase. And it's thinking. I'm going to pause here for a second, guys. I'll be right back. All right, guys, I am back. So basically, I forgot to add the inbound rule for the RDS security group. So let me go ahead and do that now. Add rule, and we'll say inbound. We're going to head and allow TCP. Let's see here. MySQL Aurora 3306, and from anywhere. Save rules. All right, let's go back into our console and let's try that again. All right, I am in. So if I do a show databases, all right, so now I am in the MySQL database, and if I just add a few entries, so create database, we'll call it Thomas DB1. Okay, that's done. So let's see if that took it. Show databases. There it is, Thomas DB1. And then we'll add another one. Create database Thomas DB2. That took it as well. All right, and there it is. So now let's go ahead and let's go back into the console. So we know that the So we know if we go back to the RDS console, right? Come on, RDS. It's really lagging today. Refresh. All right, databases. Okay, so now what we want to do is initiate a failover. So we've been writing our data in this instance 1 here, and that was in AZ1A. So now we're going to fail over and then have the reader instance become the writer instance. So let's go ahead and click on this, the writer instance, and choose action, say failover. Are you sure you want to fail over? Hit failover. All right, while that's failing over, let's go back into our console and let's go ahead and see if we can catch it in the middle of failing over. I'll just hit this until I see some sort of blip, if any. There it is. It looks like there's a little error right there. Oh, and I'm back. All right, I'm back. And my information is still there, but we did see that little quick hiccup during the failover. So let's go back into our console and refresh this. And then now our writer instance it just changed right there. So now our writer is in the 1B AZ, while our reader is the 1A. All right. So if I click on this here, here's the information, subnets ID there. So that's all good. All right. So that's that, guys. So it failed over. Database information was still there. And we witnessed a little bit of a blip during the transition. So what we need to do now is tear things down. So I'll go back to my instance. That's already chosen for me. I'll hit terminate. Yes, terminate. Okay. So while that's shutting down, go back into the console of the terminal. You can see that it just booted me out. That's fine. Go back into the AWS console and look at the databases here. So we got to shut this down now, right? So since we're done, so first thing we got to do is choose the writer instance, say action, and then say delete. Say delete me. Type that in. And then let's see how long this takes. Usually this takes about 5 to 10 minutes. So while that's deleting, I'm going to go ahead and go into pause mode, and then I'll be back when the writer instance is deleted. All right, I'll be back in a few. All right, I'm back, and I just want to point out that the reader has the writer has switched roles now. Basically, so when we were deleting the writer instance, it's flipped over to the reader being its writer. So that role has flipped, and it's deleting the reader instance now. So I'll be back when this is fully deleted. All right, guys, I am back, and the instance was deleted. It took about 7 minutes, maybe 8 minutes to delete that first instance. And let's go ahead and delete the second instance here. Action, delete. And same thing here, delete me. All right, let's see how long this takes. I'll be back. All right, guys, I am back, and that last node was already completed. It's been deleted, and that took 12 minutes for that node. So let's go ahead and delete this one now, the cluster ID. And it's going to ask you to make sure you don't want to create a final snapshot or not. So I'll just hit uncheck that. I don't need to create a final snapshot. And I acknowledge that I want to do this, and I will say delete me. And I'll hit delete database cluster. All right, refresh. The cluster ID is being deleted. Let's go ahead and see how long this takes. I'm gonna hit pause, I'll be right back. All right, I'm back, and that final logical cluster ID took about 2 minutes to delete. And so altogether, the whole Aurora RDS cluster took about 22 minutes. So now that's done. Let's go ahead and remove our security group. Security group, and I'll just hit delete these two here that I created. Refresh, and that's done. Okay, so no more EC2 instances, no more security group. Refresh that, that's terminated. All right, and then no more RDS. Go back to the dashboard, go to our databases, and nothing's there. Okay, great. Let's look at our network diagram one last time. So, so what we did was that we create an EC2 instance. We logged into our instance using the key pair, and then we downloaded MySQL from the internet onto our laptop, and then we uploaded from our laptop MySQL into the EC2 instance, and then we spun up the Aurora cluster with MultiAZ, and then we initiated failover, and then we verified that our database information was still intact and available, and then we tore down our environment. So yeah, that's it, guys. So I hope this tutorial was helpful. So keep in mind that when you're creating an RDS database and deleting the database, it's going to take a while for it to do both. All right, so I'll see you in the next video.